Guys, welcome to another episode of Joy Meets World. I'm Joy Yuki, and today I'll be sharing about my experience of White Sands National Park in New Mexico. So last episode, we covered Carlsbad Caverns National Park, which is also in New Mexico. And from there, I drove to White Sands National Park, which is about 160 miles. And it takes about 3 hours to get there. White Sands National Park was founded in 1933, and the weather was in the upper 60s, nice and dry and warm when I went. And White Sands National Park is exactly what it sounds like. It's just sand dunes for over 275 miles. Now, these sand dunes are at the foot of mountains, the San Andreas Mountains, and half of it actually belongs to a U.S. missile testing site, and the other half belongs to the national park. The sand dunes got there because it used to be an ocean or a sea at the foot of these mountains. And over time, it dried up, and the remaining rock that was underneath it kind of got pummeled by the wind and the elements. And it's actually called gypsum, and the gypsum turned into all these granules of salt. And so when you first enter the park, the sand dunes are not as tall, and they're really covered in vegetation. The farther back you go into the dunes, the higher that they get and the less vegetation that you see in the dunes. There's a road that you can drive through the dunes. You can stop. There's a couple of different trails. You can walk through the dunes, and then you can bring your own sleds and sled down the dunes. I didn't get a chance to do that because I was with my dog, and I didn't want to leave him in the car while I went sledding because it was so warm and dry out. We were both thirsty. We drank like a gallon of water between us during our time at White Sands National Park. The interesting thing about the sand dunes is that right below the surface, like they say 10 or 20 feet below the surface, there's like a lake. Like there's water right there, and it's salt water. I don't know why either of those things are the way that they are. Everything that I read and listened to didn't explain why that is so. So if you know why there's water right under the surface and why it's salty water, let me know, because I'm so interested to find out. Pets are allowed at this national park, which is really fun. You've just got to keep them on a short leash, and you have to clean up after them. But we had fun. Quincy and I had fun walking around the dunes. The city that's nearby is called Alamogordo, and there's also a natural lake or a playa called Lake Lucero. And a playa is a lake that only has water part of the year. So it's really beautiful. It had water in it when we passed over it. And we drove through there because we were actually staying in an Airbnb an hour away from the park, even more northward in Mayhill, New Mexico. And if you've ever heard of Cloudcroft, New Mexico, apparently it's like a ski town. It's one of the northernmost points in New Mexico. Mayhill's about 15 minutes from there, and we stayed in a cute little cabin. Cloudcroft, I would say, and Mayhill are about 5 to 10 degrees colder than White Sands National Park. So you really go high up into the mountains. And those mountains that it's in, they are called the Sacramento Mountains. And they are a part of a national forest, Lincoln National Forest, it's really beautiful. So besides the mountains, there's tons of pine trees, tons of hiking. I mean, the views are just gorgeous. One of the nights that we stayed, it did snow about an inch overnight and into the morning. which was really fun. It melted pretty much all the way down, though. It stopped snowing at 10, and then by that evening, all the snow had melted. And then the next day was in the low 50s, so the snow really pretty much went all away by then. I had AT&T, and there was no cellular service in Mayhill, New Mexico. The internet was really strong, which is great, but I couldn't get phone calls while I was in Mayhill. So that's just a note if you're planning to go there and have AT&T. There was also a funny little tidbit. There were donkeys, mini donkeys, in the cabin across from us, and we found out that Quincy does not like them. He is freaked out by them, and he was howling at them, especially when they made their little like hee-haw noises, which I admit does sound, I'm sure, if you're only hearing them for the first time, it does sound pretty strange. So he was disturbed. He had to come inside the house because he was howling. The cool thing about Lincoln National Park is Smokey the Bear comes from Lincoln National Park. So the story goes that there was a fire in Lincoln National Park at one point in, I want to say, maybe the 30s or 40s. And the park rangers saw it from this lookout tower, and they were going to put it out, and they saw this little baby bear caught in it. And they didn't do anything because they thought the mama bear would come back and kind of like grab the baby bear and take it away from the fire. But the mama bear like never showed up. And the baby bear climbed up this tree to escape the fire. Once the fire was out, he came down, and since there was no mama bear, they decided they're gonna like take care of it. And he had burned his paws. So they kind of nursed this baby bear back to life, and they called him Smokey. And then he became this representative for, preventing forest fires because he was caught in one. And so he became this really national emblem of preventing forest fires. And he took up residence in Washington, D.C. Zoo, and he died in 1976, and they say they gave him this like eulogy that he had been in public service for a long time, but they actually brought his remains back to Lincoln National Forest and buried him there because that's where he was originally from. So origin stories: Smokey the Bear, Lincoln National Forest, New Mexico. So that was my White Sands National Park adventure. I think what I love the most about it, it's so different from any other national park. I think the caves are like that too. They're super different. And there are a couple more caves that are national parks, and there is Great Sand Dunes National Park in Colorado, which I hope to visit soon at one point, which will be sand dunes as well. There were a couple of really good restaurants and eating places in Cloudcroft. One was Dave's. They had just really good like homemade meals and sandwiches. And then Cloudcroft Brewing Company was really good. So I had a couple of their beers, which were great. And I had pizza that they made, a small little artisanal pizza, which was delicious. And then they also carry some other local beers. So I had those, and I enjoyed it a lot. Probably the worst part about this part of the trip was just not having cell service at the cabin, because it makes life just a tiny bit harder and work a tiny bit harder. So that's it for White Sands National Park. Next up is Saguaro National Park, and that is very close to Tucson, Arizona. If you have any recommendations for this park, if you know anything about White Sands National Park of Saguaro that you want to share with me, any tips, let me know. I would love to hear them. And until next time, I wish you happy travels wherever life is taking you.